Welcome to Cue the Crew. Today's guest has been in the business since 1984. I was one. I was 1 year old.
You're not making me feel good right off the bat here.
I was 8.
But before we get to that, let's cue the crew.
This is Cue the Crew, your all-access pass to everything behind the camera, including you. Let's get started.
Today, Jack, I am thrilled to bring a good friend of mine on. He's a director, DP. He was with me for a long time on Catfish. He's still on Catfish. The one and only John DeTarsio.
Hey,
John.
man.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. What an honor, my friends.
So,
And congratulations on the podcast.
oh, thanks.
Thanks for helping make it happen. That's for sure. You may recognize John slightly if your memory is really.
Oh, okay. So I recognize John's name,
Oh, okay.
and but we've never worked before, obviously.
Right.
But you guys did remind me that John, you and I did meet very briefly one time, and I recall where it was one of those funny times where Tyler and I never get to work together. Like it's
Right.
all never. Um, we're always, doing different things. It's really fun whenever we do get to work together. I mean, I like him. He's a little bit of a micromanager, to tell you the truth, but that's okay because I'm a little flighty, so it kind of works pretty well.
We need those.
Yeah.
I,
We balance each
I've
other.
had lots of experience working with Tyler, so you don't have to explain.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah, you get it. But this was in one of those times where I was doing a show that was going forever. I believe I was doing a real high quality cable show.
Aren't they all?
This was one of the best. I believe it was Virgin Territory, Virgins in College.
You were on a travel show.
We found a couple, but they were in opposite parts of the country. There was one in Rhode Island, one in Arizona, one in Michigan, and one in Florida, where I believe that you and I ran into each other, John.
That's right. We were two opposing traveling shows. We had no versions on our show
No.
ever
Well, there might
in our
have been.
in our cast.
On the-
Yeah, maybe
About to
maybe
say,
every
what about
once.
awkward crew members? Maybe a couple here. And there.
And yeah, and Tyler, Tyler, we saw that there was other crew gear coming off on another baggage claim.
Yeah, dead giveaway.
Crews always know, and we all dress kind of alike, so we always can recognize the crew guys.
Oh yeah, everybody's wearing Solomon shoes.
Crew guys and crew women, because we all have our set dressing, I guess. And Tyler brought you over to meet us, and it was great. And like I said to you before the show, I mean, unforgettable. You're unforgettable. You have a very distinct look.
Thanks,
And
maybe.
no, I do. I mean, it is great. But I never forgot you, and Tyler speaks very highly of you, and
That's great. Thanks, man.
and you guys have a tremendous business, and it's been going a long time. So, anyways, it's good to see you again.
It's fun. We absolutely balance each other out. I am a child in many ways, and Tyler is certainly the adult in the room. It works very well. I'm very appreciative of this business partnership that we have and friendship.
Oh, shucks.
Well, and
my work wife.
And so actually, I think like my version of the story is that I just showed up at the wrong baggage claim, and probably about to pull Tyler's equipment and take it to a completely different shoot.
I can see that happening.
Yeah, I'm just bouncing around looking for pelican cases and that sticker on it, and
So, John,
Yeah, I could.
since 1984, you've been at this. You started in the news genre. You've
Right.
pivoted over to reality. You've kind of bobbed and weaved there. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're based, what you do, and then kind of a little bit of your backstory.
Sure. Well, I live in San Diego, California, and but I have always kind of had a place I'd have to stay in LA because that's where traditionally all the work is. but that's kind of my home. That's my home work area. So that's where I live. That's who I am. I came into this business out of college. I graduated in 1984. Actually, was interning and kind of working during college, but I went to college at the University of Arizona. I was a, I was a, I'm a kid. As a kid, I grew up in Asia. My mother's Korean, father Italian American, and so I grew up in Asia. Neither parent had any college, so I was just kind of went to college without any idea, without any prep at all. Had no idea what I was going to do, and in fact, my sister was already there at the University of Arizona, and I remember just before orientation going through the book of all the different degrees, and my sister goes, "I mean, this is really kind of an embarrassing admission, but it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made." She goes, "Hey, all the good-looking girls are in radio and television." And I was like, "Okay."
Good
And I
enough.
and I took a look in there, and it was like, wow, there's really not a lot of math requirements and not a lot of science requirements. This is the major for me. And of course, I did really take to it, and I loved it. But I couldn't be further away from your traditional film school kind of DP. I grew up in video. I went straight into local news, and but those were the days. Those were the days where you could really still learn a lot of filmmaking techniques. I think today's local news is a lot different, but back then it was all about technique: opening shot, closing shot, wide, medium, cutaway, lighting, and all those things were important. And there were, it was big business. Those Ron Burgundy movies were, they're obviously a satire, but back when there were like 4 stations to watch in the whole nation, eager to watch television, and there was no internet, you know, you got your information from watching the local news. And I like, our local anchor people were big stars, and there was big money in local news, and we traveled the world, and we were sent to workshops to learn how filmmaking techniques, and it was a great way to come up. And I can go on, but I don't want to. So
Well, I thought Anchorman was a documentary, was it not? Well, so some of the workshops that you said that you guys got sent to,
well,
do I remember correctly that you also helped teach some of those abroad and whatnot? Is that right?
yeah. So, I mean, the main organization that I got involved in right away was called it's still around, the National Press Photographers Association, um, which has a big annual workshop in Norman, Oklahoma, at the university there. Um, and in fact, I think they just had it. It's usually in March. So they would do these quarterly contests for news camera people, which were categorized like spot news. You had to shoot a breaking news story, shot and edited in 8 hours. A news feature that you had 24 hours between shooting and editing. General news, blah blah blah, sports, and we would compete every quarter in regionally. They split the country within 10 regions, and quarterly you would compete. Our region was all of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and you would, and then at the end of the year, you would, the biggest contest of all, the Miss America for the year was the National Press Photographer of the Year. And in 1993, I won that.
Oh,
Um,
congratulations.
Thank you. It's a lucky thing. When you get down to the final 15, 20 people, it's kind of a
It just
crapshoot,
comes
but I
down to
got lucky.
it comes down to your looks at that point.
I think so.
Yeah.
When I won that National Press Photographer Association of the Year, then I was asked to speak at this national convention. And then one thing happened after another, and I started getting asked to speak at a lot of places, which was probably the best learning experience for me, because a lot of that stuff was luck, but I had to start dissecting everything I was doing and listening to other speakers, and really kind of started to learn what was good and what was bad about visual storytelling. So that was kind of, and I was able to travel. Next thing you know, I was training people in Denmark and Ireland and Italy and just around the world and traveling. And it was a ridiculously fortunate, cool position that I had for, that I did for like 10 years.
Did your station pay for that, or did the different
No, the
station?
different places, yeah, the different places would. And that's why that's one of the reasons I went freelance, because I was running out of vacation time to do all these cool things. But yeah, I was making a little money on the side, and it was quite an amazing experience. And I think, because of that, again, in order to teach well, I had to really study and analyze and learn from the best, and pick people's brains and stuff like that.
I was just wondering, when you were in film school, did you
Oh yeah.
always know that you were going to go the camera route? Did you have an interest in the camera side from the beginning, or did you explore other departments? How'd you end up where you are?
Well, first I thought I was going to be a very cool DJ, because there were DJs back then, and I was
They were
JD the DJ.
DJ JD. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
But we putting in carts, and I love that. I love that. I thought I'd mix music. Wasn't any good at it. But I messed around in class. Thought that was really cool. Then I wanted to be an in studio director type of thing, because at the U of A, we're connected with the PBS station, so we had like little switchers and play with and stuff. So uh, loved that, and I did actually work my way up in the studio, starting as a floor director, you know, into the booth, through the technical director, and then I was directing newscasts for a while, and then that's when I found my way into the newsroom. They Because I used to in the news first station I worked at, I used to like go and find the videotape that from the stories that were shot and edited that day, and I would re-edit, because it was so fun for me, um, to edit stories. And so then I started seeing the hotshot camera guys going out, and they were like on the sidelines of the football games. They were the ones that were hanging out with the firefighters at the big fires, and I really wanted to do that, and I was kind of thrown into it, fell in love with it, was terrible at it. Um, and eventually along the way, I got a chance to report for a while, which I even identified that I was terrible at that, and found my home as a cameraman. So that was kind of the route.
Did you ever do any new stuff?
No, not really. Actually, Alabama is a pretty big news oriented program, but I was never interested in it. It's a little too scary and not interesting for me to like dive into it.
I did a couple of things. Like I covered a couple of hurricanes, like early in my career, just because I would take absolutely any job, and all the real sound guys at that point did not want to go cover hurricanes. So look,
Yeah.
man, I got rent to pay.
But like the pay was always pretty rough.
Yeah, yeah, it
I
wasn't
mean,
bad.
it still is. I mean, when you compare it to a reality show or something like that, but
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
ways to make sure you're invoicing appropriately. But
My first job in television, I earned $11,200 a year.
Nice.
1984,
But
that's pretty good.
when I left and I had a pretty good job, it was six figures, barely,
Yeah,
but just barely touched that six figures, which was, you know, in 1997, that was
It's
pretty
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 solid.
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
But but the audience is gone. It's really changed now. I mean, it's just kind of a stepping stone career. But back then, like I said, I left at the right time.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
So now
You know,
point you shifted outside of news. How did that happen? Walk me through that.
so I was actually in Ireland with a very dear friend of mine who was probably one of the best local news reporters that there ever was. His name is John Larson, and he was a national award winner. And I had asked him, because we got to know each other through these lectures and stuff, and I had asked him to come to Ireland for me. We had like 2 weeks of training to do there, and after the first week, we drove from Dublin to Galway, and because the second week of training was going to be in Galway, and along that drive, many beers, many pubs. He convinced me to try it out, and he was already at that point an NBC correspondent. and he said that he would do everything he could to make sure that um, I would get some work because it's a big investment going from the security of a corporation to back then just buying a Betacam camera and a lens and a couple of HMIs and your support stuff was $110,000.
Yeah, that's scary.
By then I already had, yeah, and by then I already had two little kids and a house. And but he convinced me to try it, and I did, and I transitioned through because he did help me um, make some contacts. I started picking up a little bit of work with NBC News, and then next thing you know, the entry level, I guess, freelance cameraman. I was doing like I don't even know the shows that exist anymore, like Access Hollywood, Entertainment Tonight, those kind of things, because that's kind of a you know
That's a lot of content right there.
yeah, you know what I'm talking about, those kind of strip shows. But I eventually was able to move my way into some of the more premiere shows at the networks, which were 60 Minutes at CBS and 48 Hours at CBS, Dateline at NBC, and 2020 and Primetime over at ABC. And I started becoming a magazine uh, cameraman, which involves a lot more emphasis on lighting. And I had a lot of people that I got to learn from through that. And I made a lot of contacts, met a lot of really cool producers, one of whom that I hung out with. And, we traveled the world for a couple of years. And he was a young, kind of really uh, intense, creative guy that we knew would find his way out of there. And he did. His name is Tom Foreman. He came to L.A. after a few years at CBS, and he was working at Endemol as a show content creator. And there's no money in that, so he would call me, his old 48 Hours buddy, to go and try to make his little creative pitches look better. And I did that, and I helped him out for a couple of years doing that. And um, he then created a show called Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and he blew up. And he took me along, and I shot for the first couple of years. That show would send the family to an exotic location while their house was being blown up, and so because that was the one area where they could use cameras for rentals, and did that. And then he moved on to greatness, and he took me along all the way. And I did most of and so I kind of transitioned into reality.
Well,
Shuttle.
yeah, well, like with Tom, it's like once you make one a big hit, you're like the guy. Like people really want to know more of what you have in the pipeline and all that sort of stuff. So it sounds like riding the coattails of anybody's successes.
And I certainly wrote his.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still am.
While you were while you were sort of making that transition, did you ever do any corporate video or sports along the way?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough to cover the San Diego when there was the San Diego Chargers. Um, there was a local show here, so that was a half an hour show every once a week. That you know, I used to shoot features for them and also hang out on the sidelines and shoot ISO stuff, which I loved, and took all my friends. Once a week, I'd have another friend that would faithfully carry batteries for me along the sidelines.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
so yeah,
A free
no,
ticket.
yeah, and corporate for sure. I mean, there's always been those corporate jobs. One of the cool things of living in San Diego, well, the downside is most of the work has been in LA, so I've always had to travel, have a place up there. But the upside also is that there's only a few of us here in San Diego, so you do get calls. Like next week, I got called by the Kelly Clarkson show. How? How they found
Yeah.
me?
Oh
Why
yeah,
they call me?
because you're one of 4 or 5 guys
Yeah,
there.
yeah. The list is small, right?
Was there a big difference in the glamour of news versus reality or news magazine stuff? How does that feel on set?
Well, it's again, I mean, if you go all the way back to the mid 80s, early 90s, all the way up to like actually probably the early 2000s, the local news was glamorous. I'm not kidding you. I mean,
Yeah.
our local anchor people I mean, they were like, I mean,
Celebrities. Yeah.
almost like Ron Burgundy. That the unsatirized version of Ron Burgundy. They were doing at every opening. They were like making appearances all the time. And again, the audiences were so big that I mean, when I came into the business, immediately I'm going to Guam to shoot a series, and I'm traveling across the country. I could name off all the countries I was in as a local news cameraman. That never happens anymore. Never,
Yeah.
never, never. There is no money in local news anymore, sadly. Um, but uh, but it was a very glamorous thing. But of course, the network shows, uh, the like for instance, when I first started working at 60 Minutes, it was like travel. We're taking a private plane to Utah because we don't want to go through airports. You know
Yeah.
that's the way it used to be. That's the way we used to roll, and
Has anyone ever
always.
flown you anywhere on a private plane?
Yeah.
I've had one.
I've had a couple, a corporation based here in Dallas. They had manufacturing operations in Mexico.
Oh, that's the same one I did.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
They're right there in left
yeah.
field.
Did
Oh,
they?
well, I think it's because I couldn't do the second
Yeah,
round.
I think so. Did you landed in that remote area
Mhm.
of Mexico and they traveled you from the airport to the campus? Did you ride in a bulletproof vehicle
That was
with
yeah,
armored cars in
yeah.
front and
That's
behind?
why we went because I believe the CEO's daughter was part of the entourage.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah.
it was great. What a
That
what
sounds cool.
It's funny that you knew all this before I did it and just neglected to tell me any of it because I'm like, why am I getting into a bulletproof vehicle? Why does that guy have a gun?
they
And
they
why
had
does
a
that
they
one
had an
have a big
incident
gun?
a while back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I learned all this after the fact. I'm just saying, would have been
Yeah.
nice had you prepped me
But
for it
also
beforehand.
during COVID, we did the UFC Fight Island. Dana took
Mm.
everybody out to Abu Dhabi, and so we covered some fights out there. But I mean,
That was a private plane.
it was a 737 that was
Wow.
private.
Oh, plane. I'm not going to name the production
That's
company,
kind of
but
cool.
good story. But they flew us from Fort Lauderdale to a place in the Bahamas, and they chartered a flight to take all the crew and the equipment. But they should have chartered two because there was not nearly enough room on that plane for all of the crew and equipment. And we had like those big silver airy cases with the casters on them,
Oh
like
yeah, I
Oh,
know.
John,
just like shoved in the aisle, like down at the back by the bathroom, and like the plane would dip and an airy case would come shooting down the aisle, just zoom. It was
strap those suckers down.
there's no way in the world that was anything remotely close to just like, oh well, this has set the tone for the rest of the
Well,
show.
but in the news world a lot, John. I remember you telling me that like you're responsible for booking your own travel.
Right. And it is the same to this day, I believe. I mean, the network magazine shows, uh, those shows are huge because their correspondents say you're working with Anderson Cooper, you're expected to give him the same kind of lighting you would give Charlize Theron for interviews. So crews would travel with, we would travel with like 40 cases between me and the sound man. Maybe I'd have 30 and the sound man would have 10 cases, and we'd have two big carts. And um, where you guys are familiar with reality television, documentaries, there's a office structure, and that office does everything they can. Some do better than others, but does everything they can to get you from point A to point B. And when I first came into reality television, I was on a big show, and everyone was complaining about, oh, that why don't they have the PA get up a little early and put the heater on in the van? We don't want to, now we have to get in this cold van, and oh my gosh, when is food? I can't believe the food they sent us. Where working for these network magazine shows, they'll say, okay, you're going to meet Scott Pelt, you're going to meet Dan Rather in Waco, Texas tomorrow. What are we shooting? I don't know. Okay, so let's load up all 40 cases of gear. Now I'm gonna start by calling Trout travel and trying to book planes and figure out how we're going to get all the gear there. Um, and we prep all the gear ourselves, and we have to book our hotel. We have to figure out where the gear is going to stay, usually kind of just in our own hotel rooms and split up amongst ourselves where it's going to be overnight, how we're going to get from the airport to there, and how we're going to get to the shoot, and just everything along the way. So I, I have tremendous respect for these people that still do this. I had had enough after 20 years of it,
Yeah, I bet.
but um, it's like 70% of stressful travel coordination,
Yeah, that's a whole
and
nother job.
yeah, and then 30% of actual DP camera work.
Yeah.
And so it was a bit stressful for me. I didn't like that because it was usually very complicated, um, and really stressful.
Well, that sure did prep you for what came later in Catfish. I mean, that's all kinds of travel that you
Before
got
we
to do.
get to Catfish, though, still in the news days and news magazine days, what were some of the tricks that have now disappeared uh, that the camera guys use to soften the background or soften the entire image? I remember stories of like Barbara Walters having a very specific lighting setup, and that
Yeah,
setup
sure.
included shooting the key through an actual shower curtain, one of those thick
Well,
shower curtains.
that may be, but what I know, because I know actually some of the guys that shot for Barbara Walters, which was a very narrow that like Barbara Walters, you actually got a lighting DP for. But beyond that, we used to have to light everything. But but with Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer, it was like get the most giant HMI that you can and like aim it straight at their face. Oops, I'm sorry. Aim it straight at their face, and then take like 90 flags to narrow out all the, blast that you get in everywhere else. So you're shooting a beam of light like straight into their face.
Wow.
Um, and which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't imagine they
But
teach you that in film school, huh?
no, but as far as tricks, tricks as far as like I have, the background. That's just me picking a lens that can separate and the f-stop and blah blah blah. Well, in video, you can just open your lens or close your lens.
That's
So
it.
what I like, one of my tricks was I get like for my interviews, I try to get like 20 feet away from my subject so I can zoom in as far as I can to compress the background. So that was like one of the tricks that we use. We'd use this. Sometimes we'd use this um, gel called
Hampshire Frost.
Hampshire Frost.
Hmm.
Yeah, and we'd set that up behind just if we were in a small room to try to create that depth. I used to always do everything I could to shoot at 1.7 f-stop, or whatever my lens would allow me to do. But yeah, there were lots of tricks like that. And then there was the filtration. I mean, I don't even carry filters with me anymore because post can do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a couple, but post can do pretty much everything they want. But all these pro mist each anchor person had a different pro mist filter that you would use, or
What about
you know.
the pantyhose on the back of the lens trick? Did you
Oh
use?
yeah, oh yeah,
What
absolutely. I did
what
that.
does that do?
You take the lens off. There was a store right in Beverly Hills, I think right on Wilshire Boulevard. I think there was a Neiman Marcus. I may still be there. And because you had to get a certain kind of stocking, and they were like the hundred
It's like
hundred
the
dollars stocking.
500 silk count or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
From
Quality.
what I recall, they were like 100% silk pantyhose, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and you take off your lens and you put it around the back of the lens, and then you put the lens into the camera. And yeah, it creates this beautiful soft, it wouldn't fly today. You
Yeah.
put that on today and people would go, what the hell is wrong with that
That's
camera?
why I
But
think
back
it's
then it was
funny,
like,
right? Because
whoa.
I'm sure that there's camera guys out there today. They're like, "What the hell? You put pantyhose on the back of the?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so amazing. So did you have like do you have like a specific Anderson Cooper makeup kit? Do they you kind of just go with it, whatever?
Well, they generally would. Yes, I didn't have I didn't. I did have like a very expensive, uh, I I can't remember the name brand of it, but I had a very specific expensive makeup kit that I carried around, which was, but I was just powder. I mean, they did, and they still do pay money for the big anchors and, cast people that are being interviewed, especially women. Women, I don't think.
Is there? It feels like there'd be a lot of hurry up and wait. Is that kind of the sort of the vibe on set? If
News magazine shoots are, I mean, they've all kind of become murder mystery shows
mm,
now. Um, but back then we would, I wouldn't say hurry up and wait, but it would be everything is about the interview and the interview with the correspondent, you know. Um, and because the correspondent is the star of the show, and, we'd have two, three, four cameras on two people talking in the middle of a room. And that's where all the emphasis, that's where all the time is spent, or most of the time is spent. And then that and their walking shots, that's where the majority of the time and effort and lighting and everything else happens. And then say on a murder mystery, then, then once the correspondent is gone, that's when you do your shooting. Because, again, in reality TV, which is set up, the structure is like making a movie. You have your ACs, you have your PAs carrying around heavy stuff for you. You have your office in there, making sure things are on course. You have your ACs, you have your sound. You have sound guys on some shows have their A2s. You have everyone has a line and everyone has a job. Well, on these magazine shows, the shoots are much grander often because you're doing so much more with lighting. When you're doing two camera interviews, you got the big equipment with the lights coming flying overhead, and um, but it's just you and the sound guy
yeah,
doing
yeah, that's a
it
lot.
all,
It's a lot of work.
and or sometimes two camera guys and two sound guys.
Yeah. So it's about maybe 15 to 20 years after you've been in the business and you're kind of in the heyday of 48 hours, all that. Like kind of a grand shoot, a lot of stuff, a lot of pretty lighting going on. And did you like what does a week look like working on something like that? Like, is it fairly regular, or did it take a whole week, or just a couple of days, or what? Because that's a lot of time away.
Another big stress of that was, if you know most of us in that business are working for multiple clients, right? Because you want to fill your calendar best you can. So you get a project with Dateline, which is going to be, two shoot days, two travel days, or whatever, and that's 3 weeks from now. Um, and so you start thinking about that. But today you're working on a 60 minutes story, and then next week now you just landed another job for 48 hours. All those producers really think that you, the DP, is sitting in your office looking at all, ready to do nothing but talk to
Sure.
them and brainstorm how the story is going to be shot. You're juggling stories and not telling them that, well, I got Dateline next week, or, so even I would say, so I don't really know how to answer your question other than to say a 2 day shoot is basically a week of work, you
Yeah.
know, um, because it's all of that. And then also the way that their billing structure is, that's a whole nother thing I can tell you. 2 days of shooting is a whole day in the billing room, um, because you have to bill. I mean, it's a good thing, but you bill a la carte. You have two different streams that you're doing. You have to justify every single receipt. And when you're traveling, like that Waco trip that I told you about, I have $2,500 of receipts, and you're racing through 1,000 miles an hour. Now you have to go back and justify all those receipts. You have to do a whole form on that. I mean, so yeah.
You never had outside help to help you manage? That's
No, I
a
mean,
whole nother job.
I
So
mean, I
you're a travel coordinator,
yeah,
a
You
DP,
should have
yeah. If
an
trained up
accountant.
one of yours,
Yeah, no
John.
kidding.
I mean, we've been in so many weird situations where, like Dustin, my sound man who was with me since I went freelance, um, uh, you know, I'd be shooting B-roll and he'd be on the phone on hold with travel for 2 hours, um,
Wild.
you know, stuff
So
like that.
you've mentioned Waco a couple of times. That was another career maker for a lot of people. Were you? I've heard stories about people that like literally just had to be there at the side of the road for like whatever it was, 32, 33 days. And so
Yeah.
for the first 12 hours that they were there at the side of the road, they were into time and a half. And after that, they were into double time for the next 32 days. And they just sat there in their cars and heated
Yeah.
and ate peanuts and drank bottled water for.
Yeah. If you had an event like that, like it's a terrible, I hate to even think about it because it's such an awful, I think we all know it's a very dirty way to even
Hmm.
think, but when we had these ridiculous, terrible wildfires, a few months
Hmm.
ago here in Southern California, my friends who still work, are still connected with ABC and NBC and CBS, and that's a large part of their business. You know, there was so much work for them, and you know, I I just I call and say, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing? Are you doing okay?" Thinking there goes my
Yeah,
dog back
that's
there.
great.
Thinking how tragic it must be and how down. I'm trying to call them, tell them to keep your spirits up, and they're like, "Oh, it's great. I got 15 hours yesterday. I got 18 hours
Oh,
and nonstop. I'm making so much money." And
that sounds
it's kind
miserable.
of
It
sad.
does sound miserable.
It's
Yeah.
it's miserable and it's sad. But yeah, I mean, you get a big story like, I know a guy who during OJ,
Yeah.
OJ Simpson trial, which lasted such a long time, that was the beginning of the Joker
Hmm.
HMIs,
Hmm.
and there were so many courses. He filled his truck up with HMIs and would just drive up and down and rent them out every day
Really?
to like
Nice.
various crews. He became
Like an ice cream truck, but
Hmm.
he,
for HMIs.
and then he bought a house in Malibu. He was a rich man
It's
after that.
great.
Yeah,
Hope
he
hope his house is
he
okay.
was one of the people who was trusted to light Barbara Walters.
Nice. Well, John, are there any, during the rush of all that, like ultimately you get a good looking frame that like, is there anything that you spent time on that just no one notices? Only you're the only person that knows it and can appreciate what it took to get something like that.
Well, I mean, I think all of us can relate to that. I mean, for you guys with sound, and I mean, it's as long as it sounds, if you don't hear anything, you did a great job. You're only going to hear when something goes wrong. So
That's my goal is for nobody to mention my name during that
exactly,
time. But
it, it,
anytime anybody in the sound
exactly,
department, that means that there's been a problem. So like I don't need compliments. I just need for everyone to forget that I'm here. By
exactly.
the way, how much did you spend on your background for today? Because it looks lovely relative to ours.
I spent no time. I have one light here, and then I have one light there, but to make sure the living room stays lit because the sun is just starting to come out. So finally,
Ah, yes.
it'll start to overtake my light.
Yeah. Of course, you've thought about
That's the difference between a TP's
that.
back
Yeah.
podcast background and a
Yeah.
sound guy's
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast background.
but
Daylight.
but no, I would say that yeah, there was a lot of times I that's what I love about and I'm not generalizing. There are some sound people. Generally, those are the ones I don't like who do like attention. But the general vibe with sound guys is, they do tremendous work and nobody says their name, and that means they're the best sound people that in the business.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, with me, I'm in a different business, and I always wanted the attention. So it would break
Yeah.
my heart that I would frame like a live shot and make a person look as I think better in that shot than they look in real life, and it would break my heart when no one noticed it. But I think, that was a part of growing up and just becoming an adult, which I was not an adult, I guess, for a big part of my life. But yeah, I think we all experience that.
So, John, how do you feel like your approach to storytelling in the news world transitions into even after news magazine stuff? Once you got into the reality side of things,
Yeah, yeah,
kind of a different background. How does that approach translate?
yeah. I appreciate that question. I feel like it was a blessing that the way that I learned my craft, um, because I had the ability to practice so much in local news and be out there every day. And I kind of learned during that time, and when I was competing in contests and stuff like that, to get higher within that business, was when I was able to capture real life at it as it happened, as opposed to, say, for instance, if someone's walking out the door and I'm shooting with this person, if I say just walk from here to here and then I'm going to get a shot of the door and then I want you to open the door and then then I'm going to get in front of you again and you can walk out. In local news, I learned to shoot that stuff, all these sequences, in real life. So they would just leave the kitchen to walk out the door, and I would shoot, let them go out the frame, run ahead of them, shoot a cutaway of the door, run ahead of them again. So they're just doing one motion. But then what I learned was they looked real.
Yeah.
It looked like real life. So that's just kind of a silly example there, but with everything in life, I learned to talk to people without looking in my camera, like have it on my lap and talk to them not looking at my camera. And I learned that they would react in a more, they're talking to me now and not performing for the camera. And I learned a lot of techniques to bring real life into my storytelling. And whenever I was lucky to capture real life, I would use it. So, say if someone's making dinner, right, and they're showing me how to make dinner, but then they hit the fork and it goes flying off, a lot of people would edit that out. That would be my favorite part of them going, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry. That was so embarrassing." Um, so so that's what local news taught me, I think. That's what I learned. I think that's not what you learn in film school.
Right.
And it's not a knock on film school because there's a whole lot of things I didn't learn by not going to film school that I had to figure out later as my career went on. But so those are the things that I've always pushed executive producers to, like, hey, take a look at this. And those are the things that I'm always trying to capture when I'm shooting. And that comes at the expense of how beautiful it looks. But you know, uh, I don't think people really care. So I have this uh, tidbit that thing that I think about a lot, which is I coined it for myself, the student union basement, my student my student union basement theory, which is when I was in college, the student union in the basement was a room, and that's where all the funky bands would play and all the weird shit stuff would happen. And if you were interested in it, you go in there and you'd go like, wow, really cool, right? Just like with camera people can like really dazzle with like, oh, look at this, is the best drone shot in the world, and look at this tracking shot I got, and look at this beautiful sunset and person sitting and watching the sunset. And all the other camera people will go ooh and ah like crazy.
Yeah.
But but
why? Just
people
do it.
aren't necessarily, yeah, and people aren't necessarily moved by it. So um, I feel like real life is actually the most riveting thing in the world. Not to say that stuff doesn't work, but like when I worked at 48 Hours, when I first started working at 48 Hours, it was very much a handheld show. If you were going to interview somebody, you just kind of stood them next to the window so you got some light. And it was because that show started out, the way they got their name, 48 Hours, was they would descend on a story and they would cover it on the street. Like, we're going to Crack Street. And they'd send like 10 cameras out there and everyone would shoot a story for 48 hours and then they'd edit them together. Well, then it became this murder mystery where they wanted things to be beautiful. And by the time, so then it was a lot of fun, like experimenting with lighting and tracking shots and all this stuff. And then we got to the point where we're with the detectives and they're looking at files and we've got, dollies going back and forth. And so the
Yeah.
detectives are like now like going,
Making a movie. You're making a movie.
handing papers over. And then like correspondent is talking to a detective and we were like, no, you have to stand here.
Back to one.
On your mark.
Yeah.
If you move this much, you move out of my light. And if you move out of my light, then it's a disaster. And what that did was, to me anyway, it made the show so boring to watch. I'd much rather just like be in there and watch the detectives work and tilt up and move around and feel the energy of what they're doing and make it feel like real life, like you were there as an audience in real life. So those are the things that I love to do, which is part of why, Catfish was the perfect fit for me.
Yeah. So this concept of content is king is not new exactly. It's been happening.
And so I think it's interesting that your career, whenever you were transitioning from news magazine stuff to kind of reality shows with Extreme Makeover, that's also like kind of in the gear transition, or what I remember is the gear transition. Because, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Extreme Makeover and those things, like those were still beta SP, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
like when
yeah. In the beginning. Yeah.
we're still having to do like kind of a modern day reality show, but you were still doing it in the old style with HMIs and Dado lights and Refa lights and shit, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like we think about reality television, we're like, oh yeah, it's a fucking one by and a camera that can work well
Yeah.
in low light situations. Whereas it was just a completely different thing, like equipment wise back then, right?
Yeah. It was a lot of big, heavy gear for sure. And putting people in boxes and saying, well, Extreme Maker is probably not a great example, but it was a lot of big lights so the cameras could see and putting them in place.
And so now it seems like it's a little bit, just because of technology, it seems like it's a little bit easier to achieve both, where you can still make it good light, still make it look good because you can achieve shallow depth of field and all that stuff much easier than you could back in the day. So you can sort of concentrate more on just the real content in front of you because the technology can make it look better than
Yeah,
in the beta SP days.
for sure. And we have so much more soft lights that are the powerful soft lights as opposed to hard.
He's a sound guy, John. You'll have to excuse him.
Yeah. Sorry.
He'll
I'll
stop
try my
the
best.
entire production just to.
Fortunately, I'm half dead.
Whoa, we just had an earthquake.
Oh man, I was just saying the other day.
It's still happening.
Oh man.
Oh shit, you
See my dog
can.
back there?
Yeah. Go get safe, John.
Let me go see. Let me go
Yeah.
Yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hang on.
Goodness. Ooh, we don't have those a lot in Texas.
2 minutes later.
That was crazy.
You okay, man?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a. I just got
Your
an
dog's still there.
emergency alert. Earthquake detected. Drop cover. Hold on. Protect yourself.
No shit.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Wow, we're capturing
I
news right now.
yeah. Wait, John. This is it. This is the news.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure there's
I saw your whole image shaking and everything.
that
Which makes
it I have lived in this house for 23 years and that's the first I've felt it like that here.
whoa.
Wow.
That was an actual shake. I
Yeah.
mean, we've had I can remember maybe twice in the last 23 years I felt like it felt like something just like kind of just dropped. This was an actual tremor.
Wow.
Yeah. I think you always want to be capturing the news story, not being part of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Dogs going and everything. Wow. He stayed there on that comfy couch though.
Yeah, I know. But she freaked out and she's very calm dog, except obviously when
Wow.
neighbors walk by.
Except for in the middle of a fucking earthquake. That's
Phew.
understandable.
Man, that was
Whoa.
crazy. It was two
Careful of the
seconds,
aftershocks. Yeah. Yeah. It was. Yeah. It was like
two times.
two little quakes. Ooh.
I
Is
thought you were
Okay.
really mad at me because I touched my wire at first.
Yeah. That's I sent the
Natural
picture.
disaster talk. Have you ever been in a tornado?
I have not been in a tornado. I did cover a hurricane with Dan Rather, and we chased the hurricane. When we left, I got called at like 5 in the afternoon, and we got a red eye. Dustin and I got on a red eye and met. And now people are texting me. Are you all right? Are you all right?
Feel free to respond.
We met him in Florida because it was supposed to be in Florida. No, we met him in Georgia because it was supposed to be there, but the hurricane kept going south. So we drove down the coast into Florida where it finally hit. And that whole drive, I mean, there were tornado warnings. There was all kinds of crazy stuff. uh, and loads of traffic going that way, and we were headed like one of two
Oh yeah,
cars going that way.
yeah.
It,
Look at these
That
full. Have you ever did you ever see the LA quakes or anything like that?
I did cover the big ones that happened in the early 90s. And I was in a satellite truck with an aftershock that was like
Oh
that was
wow.
the most tremendous one that I had, and also one the next morning in a hotel room where we had an aftershock. I was literally um, like I had like motion sickness for
Whoa.
for a while after that.
But don't go on a cruise. Advise against that. All right. So out of all the news segments, and we'll include news magazine stuff, what's your most memorable one that you've been a part of?
I have to say, the first one that comes to my mind. I mean, just like when people ask me what my favorite episode of Catfish is, there's no real answer. Same
Yeah.
thing with news because it's like they're in so many different categories. It's like this was
Right.
the most heartwarming one. This was my favorite character. This was the most greatest adventure of all. This was so. One of the things that's coming to my mind right now, like kind of like, oh my gosh, look at my background now. I'm sorry. Um, uh,
Yes, it's terrible.
the sun came out. The sun came out. Uh,
you're still good in comparison.
it's on fire. Anyways, my most memorable was covering the LA riots as a local newsman.
Oh,
Talk about no, it was just me and a local reporter, two dumb guys that like are barely 30 years old. And I mean, I would think that if any, your audience, probably nobody was even alive back then. That was in the early 90s, I think.
So were you doing like man on the street shit with the looters?
Oh,
Pardon me,
we
sir.
literally didn't know what we were doing. We just drove to LA in the middle of the night when we heard it was on
Jesus.
fire and then looked for
Yeah.
flames.
Didn't have to look
Next
far.
thing you know, we're in South Central LA and like everything is on fire. And I mean,
Right.
it was very dangerous at the end of that first day. Nobody knew what to do, but the media kind of settled on like this is where we're doing our live shots for some reason out on by some command center. Police didn't know what they were doing either. And I remember like it was such a dire experience that the cops kind of towed in a car, and in the car was a driver still in its seatbelt, dangling dead, being towed into the command center because a normal police event like that, um, they'll cover the body or something, and or they won't even move until the coroners come and they do all their thing. And I was like, wow, this is the craziest thing in the world. And a crew left uh, to go to the hotel, and they came back in 5 minutes, and all their windows had been shot out.
That's crazy.
That's
It
nuts.
was the wildest thing in the world.
Mine, by the way, most
Mhm.
dangerous was shooting a fruit juice commercial in the favela in Brazil, where we had to have security, and our security guy was the ex-drug lord of that particular favela for a fruit juice commercial.
None of that surprises me.
Ridiculous, this industry.
Yeah. So fast forward, you got onto Catfish because of Tom Foreman,
Right.
your work with him. The first time the show was pitched to you, I mean, like, did it
Yeah.
did the pitch of the show end up matching what you guys did out in the field?
Tom Foreman actually called me into his office and said, and brought it to me. He said, "It's happening. Catfish is happening." Um, and I was already familiar with it at that time. And he said, I think your news experience is going to be good, and your spontaneity is
Yeah.
going to be good for this show.
How about that?
And he goes, but there's no money. It's MTV where there's not a lot of money because nobody knew. And he goes, so Max is your second cameraman. And I was like, can he shoot? And because in the pilot he couldn't shoot because they gave him a big
Oh,
huge
right.
camera to shoot with, and it was terrible. And so that's where it started. And my first thing on my mind was to find the smallest camera with the best image, with the stabilizer in it that would make sense, that would look good on camera. And so that's where we found the right camera for it. And so that was the origin of it. Was hey, we want this show to look like it's just a couple of dudes and, men. When I say dudes, I mean men and women out on the road, you know, in a camper van going
Right.
across the country. And to me, that meant that means all of us are included. The crew,
Yeah.
everybody's in on this, and that's how we're gonna embrace that it's just us people, and that became the culture of the show.
Yeah. No kidding.
So that was one of the first shows, and you guys may have other experiences that different than mine, but that was the first show that I remember that really mixed cameras and mixed media and
Yeah.
really embraced that to give it sort of that
What were we?
that real
I
feel.
remember early on, John gave me a call. I was like, "We've got, tell me about tech specs,
Mhm.
right? We got whatever, we got whatever the
C300 or
uh,
some shit,
I
and
don't know, a 605 or something like that. We got a shoulder cam and like three or four other smaller cameras. Some have time coders that are like that. Don't have time code. Also, by the way, 5 GoPros or something like that.
Mhm.
Oh, that sounds like a big crew. No, it's this guy right here
Mhm.
running it all, or at least conceptually making sure the cameras are in the right place, and which actually, that it works perfectly for the style of the show, because you set it down, and if something happens in the frame, that's great. If nothing does, that's fine. We know we're not using it. It's made to capture the moment, the real life that you were talking about. And as a highly effective way, and you're able to get angles by doing, especially on some of like Max's power shots things, a whole new
Yeah.
perspective on the emotions and everything that are happening, because they're running high for these hopefuls and catfish.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of grew from the origin. I mean, you were there at the beginning days
Yeah,
when it was, it was literally you, me, and and you know, I say Brandon, but our AC
yeah,
at the time, and that was it. That was the entire crew. But at that time, it really was just kind of Max's camera and my camera trying to make up for all the everything else. But what started to think about as we went on was like, this is actually kind of, with the exception of the stuff that we do in the field, which is just a small part of the show, a lot of the show is we're sitting down. It's
yeah,
almost like it's like this,
yeah,
they're at a computer or they're in the room or whatever. And I realized that, you know, these guys, and what I also hate are these fake reaction shots of people going, "Oh, really?" These you want that in real life. So that's when I started, and trust me, Post hated my guts. They
yeah,
did not like the fact that when I started adding cameras and angles, and already we were using like the little power shot for Max or the little 105 that I started adding more of those little cameras just so I can get everybody's reaction at the same time in real time. So, now somebody says something, but I have another camera there that captures Neve's eyebrow just going like this or going,
yeah.
in real time. Now the show becomes way more intense and way more interesting. So yeah, at last count, 23 cameras go on every episode.
Yeah.
and so the fact that the cameras didn't match, that
Right.
really didn't have anything to do, like that wasn't like a stylistic choice. It was more of just a utilitarian thing of, hey, I need a small camera so I can plan it over there so that we can get all the different reactions that we need.
Yeah. So as the DP part of me hated that they didn't match,
Yeah, that's got to be a
but
tough pill to swallow.
yeah, it was hard. I didn't like that part of it. But what I hated more was not getting all the reaction as it happens in real time. We established really early on that we were never going to do anything twice unless
Hmm.
literally my camera fell off or
Hmm.
really the sound person says my mixer just plain stopped working. Unless
Only
it's,
happened once.
which only happened once, and well, it only happened once for my camera. Kind of like the lens fell off the body, um, but uh, but we so and I but I was able to get over my angst of that because we were already showing Max holding a little
Yeah,
Canon power shot on camera anyway. and I
Hmm.
knew that I could pick up a bunch of those for like $300 a piece,
Hmm.
and then it just started to build from there. And you know what? And like I said, post was not a fan of it. They didn't they didn't like looking at all the stuff, let alone
Hmm.
Yeah.
the color shifts and all that. And they worked for a while. They worked really hard at trying to cover that up, and fix it best they could in post. And it was David Metzler, the showrunner, who finally told Post, "Quit trying so hard." He goes, "All I realize is every time I screw John up and he doesn't know where he's supposed to be and he has to find his way, or every time there's a crappy shot but something happens in it, he goes, the show becomes more real
Yeah.
because it
Good
is
time.
real."
Hmm.
And so let's embrace that. And so, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the executive producer that embraced it wholly. Well, but the new shows, it's kind of rare that they don't look great because I have cannons all the way across,
Yeah.
and
But a lot
they
of
have the
practice.
yeah, and they have the ability to really and match each other. And I shoot them at a really, the wide DR
Hmm.
mode. So and the GoPro's flat, and they're able to just throw LUTs on them and
Yeah.
deal with
Wow.
it.
If you had the choice to put a camera operator on each of those cameras, like how would that affect a show like Catfish?
Yeah, it wouldn't do well. It wouldn't do well at
Yeah.
all because so many of our scenes, as you know, Tyler, and I know you're throwing this question to me because you already know the answer. They're very, very intimate, and part of the reason that it works so well is there's just, we throw most of the traveling crew with us in vans outside wherever we're shooting, or in another hotel room that's across the hallway. And inside the room are literally like two people that aren't on camera, or three people. It's Tyler, it's RAC, Brandon, and myself. And we don't generally, and of course the showrunner. Everybody else has got to be away, and I think the intimacy of that and the comfort that brings to our hosts. I mean, I think all of that plays into, again, these the origin story of me. Getting, and that's always my focus, is trying to capture real life as it happens and putting them in an environment that uh, that it's real life. And a lot of times I'll set the cameras and then I'll sit down and block myself quietly and try to not uh, you know
Yeah.
make a lot of noise and stuff like
Were you typically in the room, or were you like in the hallway or hiding
that.
Well, yeah, it's anywhere that's available.
in the
A lot
pantry?
of the houses are terribly small. There's not a lot of options. Usually in the kitchen if they're in the living room. Main thing is just try to stay out of the eye line as best possible.
Would you sit on the
For
kitchen
many
floor? Or are
reasons.
you too much of a diva for that?
I don't.
No, I can't see I've ever seen him do that,
Yeah,
unless maybe he had a really, really rough night and that's all he could find.
yeah, it's the safest place to be sometimes. Have you ever taken your what is now your approach on Catfish, that version of storytelling? Have you taken that to other projects?
Well,
That's
I can't say that I've taken that to other projects, but I've had so many other projects come to me
yeah. You're the Catfish
because
guy. Yeah,
they think that I'm going to bring this certain energy to it,
yeah,
and I'm always happy to do so. But it scares producers to tears because the way it goes is, producer gets a project, they call the DP, and the first directive is, I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be
yeah,
soft bokeh background. The show is going to be completely different because this is going to be the most beautiful show in the world. And again, I think back to my, PTSD days of like watching 48 Hours go from a very spontaneous show to, don't move 3 inches because you just left my light. So I don't, every time I hear, I want it to be beautiful. I mean, there are times that I do like it to be beautiful, trust me. But that scares me. But it is like, since Catfish, it seems like more and more people do want to know, what is the magic? They can't identify it. What is the magic? How does this show, how do you do it?
yeah, yeah. Well, also the across the entire industry and social media, the collective standards have been lowered to. It really changes the the shift in what the audience really cares about, and
I suppose so.
it,
Yeah,
it's
I suppose you're right there.
story more or less. Um,
Yeah.
It's because of like things like this podcast, where you look at our background and people are just desensitized
yeah,
to it.
they
Like
give a
not
shit.
John's background. John looks like an actual TV show.
Right.
We look like a couple up against a wall with bad lighting.
Well,
Oh, you look like you're in a podcast room.
I
we-
mean,
we
as
are.
is, it tracks for us.
Yes.
Along we're part of the problem, not really part of the solution.
John, how often do you get asked to be on camera? I know you were in a movie one time.
As you're you.
Yeah.
Are you still enjoying your
I think
your
that
royalty
that was
checks?
Tyler's way of getting himself into the
Yeah.
conversation. He was so hoping that, yeah, you were in that movie too, Tyler.
The
Yeah.
quarterly that come in, it's just hilarious. It's funny.
What was your last residual check? How much?
I was in the
Oh, they're
it's dwindled down to about $18 or $20 a quarter. And then like maybe during the Christmas season, I think we might get up to $100 or something like that. But
yeah, but it was pretty good in the beginning.
oh,
So so our host like when the show Catfish was really in the zeitgeist there for a while back when Tyler was on it full time. Neve, our main host, started texting back and forth with Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry really loved the show. And so eventually Tyler Perry wrote a Catfish element in a movie called Nobody's Fool?
yeah, it ended up being Nobody's Fool was the name of it.
And wanted the real hosts of the show to be on the show, called Neve and Max to come do the show. And Neve, God love him, said, "You know what? I think I'll feel more comfortable if I have my real cameraman in doing camera." And he was like, "Fine, bring. You can have you can bring up to 3 people. You bring 3 people." And of course, Neve and I talked, and even though Tyler had already left the show, he's our guy, and so of course we called and invited Tyler, and it was the coolest, funnest experience. Was that not fun?
No, it was super fun. It does a lot about a lot of things. That Neve would do that, and consider something.
Yeah.
But also opens up. Wow, these like at this point we're actors.
We didn't really get a lot of direction.
Yeah.
But he never had to fix us either.
That's true. We were
You guys are a couple of naturals.
One take wonders here.
We nailed it
I
every
was going
time.
to call you out if you were holding a boom pole in the movie. And I was going to be like, yeah, you never do that. You're definitely acting.
Yeah, it's 100% true. But flew us first class to Atlanta, to the studios. It was really neat to see the scripted narrative side of the business, which I'm not in quite as much as reality.
Right.
But they treated us with a lot of respect. We've got I got hair and makeup treatment along with everyone else. The biggest waste of money, I would think. I also got
yeah, they cut my hair.
No, they had to take the shine off.
I think they
That's
turned
like
it on.
shooting into a disco ball.
I think they turned on the razor or something, but like my first haircut where you're not actually doing anything. They just sent it over there. Like, okay, I was really in the chair. I got Eddie Murphy's per diem by mistake.
No.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Did you get all the stuff like with the writer too, like the candy?
No,
and the
I sent the orange M&Ms back.
What was Eddie Murphy's per diem?
It was $75, which was $25 higher than mine, which I personally feel very proud of.
You know what? That's a win, dude. That's a win.
Absolutely, he's certainly worth.
Dude, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so it was a fun time. But yeah, it's fun things like that happen in this industry.
One of my greatest memories is like when the limo dropped us off.
Oh yeah.
On set, and the people, the whoever came to get us, got us and started walking us to our dressing rooms, and I heard her get on the radio and say, "A-team's walking." Walking.
Yeah, talent on set.
It's like, yeah, that's right. A-team on set.
I do feel like A-team. That's right. I don't remember meeting my stand-in though.
What just went out?
Yeah, I think you lost the light.
Our backlight went out. My shine went away. That's okay.
It did.
That's okay. We still sound all right. Well, I've got
All right,
just
that's how we sound. A couple of sound guys doing a
It's
podcast.
fine.
We sound all right.
We care enough. Before we let you go, got one more segment. It's called our martini round. It's a little
Oh,
behind the scenes trivia. So, worst craft service snack you've ever had?
Kelp,
Yeah, you can answer. It's fine.
great.
fried ice
Oh,
cream.
I know how you feel about fried things. One piece of gear you'd save in a fire.
Oh man, camera. Sorry, I can't think of anything funny.
Just a camera. Okay. What's your biggest on-set pet peeve?
My biggest on-set pet peeve is people complaining about lunch.
Open walkies.
Oh, but yeah, those are all bad. What's one thing you tell your first day on set self?
Quit trying so hard to be liked.
Amazing. That's all I got for that round.
I'm sorry, terrible answers.
No, that's all right. That'll work. So let me get your take on the state of the industry real quick before we go. 2025, things have changed a lot. Streaming wars are sort of now over. Had a couple strikes that have impacted things a lot. What do you feel like? Where are things now? Where is it going? What's your take on that based on everything you've seen?
Yeah, well, I will tell you my take, and I'm hoping to get some, you guys will give me some hope because unfortunately, I feel very dire about it. And I worry, my son works on The Bachelor, and I'm just worried about when that gig ends, man, what is there going to be anything left for him? Because I'll be okay. I mean, I've had a good 40-year run, and I don't really need to do this anymore. But I mean, I think that the biggest impact right now is with streaming, cable crashing, and cable networks about to totally cave. I think I think it might end up
It's a
being
new
the death
world.
of Catfish. That also these reality shows that you and I have been doing for the past 10, 15 years are also going away. And I wonder what if that is the case. And I mean, in LA, reality television was down like 78% last year.
Yeah, vacant studios and everything.
Everything. I just read a report today that said writers' jobs are 40% down
Wow.
this year. And I wonder, I mean, in 40 years, I've always I always felt so lucky that the entertainment business was kind of bulletproof from economic
Yeah.
drops. But this is so different. And I wonder, do you think either people are just tired of watching reality shows? Or have reality, are they going the way of, like when I was in college, it was all soap operas all day long, like 4 hours of soap operas. Soap operas died, and reality television became the new soap opera. And now I hate to say it, but I feel like reality shows are dying. And except for the big
Yeah.
behemoth reality
Right.
shows like The Bachelor and the
Dancing with the Stars, and
yeah, or right,
if you
Yeah.
want to consider,
Survivor,
yeah,
Yeah.
and game shows and cooking shows or whatever. But and those jobs are kind of rare, and they shoot 2 seasons in like a
Yeah.
month's time, and
Right.
that's it. You got
Squeeze
11
it.
months to go find more work. Um, and so, did the unions do too good of a job negotiating? Is it because of cable? Am I wrong? Give me
I
something to hope
I
for.
I feel like it's a lot of these things intertwined at the same time. As soon as viewership switched over to a lot of phones being accessible as a platform, and then what was the network? Did
Go
the
90
no
or
the
Quibi.
Quibi's the one I'm thinking of. They
Right.
go at it. I mean, they saw sort of the writing on the wall, and we're trying to capitalize it. Maybe a little too early, but now the barrier for entry has long been cost, and that is gone by the wayside with everyone having a phone and an idea and putting something out there. Because as we sort of leaned into a lot recently, content is king. So uh, you just make something good or have a genuine idea, and you don't need a network to show that. You put it on
Right.
YouTube, whatever the social media platform is there, and if somebody else likes it a lot more, you're either going to get more interest from corporations or sponsorships or possibly even networks. But I think it's shifted entirely, and it's going. Every content's being created from the ground up rather than the ceiling down.
I agree with that, and I think there will be produced content, but I think that it's going to be that upper echelon produced content, and the reality stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, that is largely going to go away and just be completely replaced with self-created content. And I don't think that it will be consumed in 30-minute or 1 hour minute or 30-minute or 1 hour episodes. It's going to be consumed 3 minutes at a time. But that appetite for reality television is going to be,
Yeah,
satisfied through watching
5 minute
content
episodes.
creators in
on YouTube.
90 seconds to 4.5 minute
Yeah,
episodes.
so I think we've also the pendulum has swung a little bit of like self shot or like shooting just making your own content. People do seem to value production value and that sort of stuff, but like if you take like the Dude Perfect guys for example, I think they're a great example. They were very self shot, but now it's grown into a tremendous production team, and it's
Right.
but when I'm on set with them, they're thinking about it, and that functions entirely different than any network show that you've ever been a part of.
Right.
They are sort of producers on it. They know what's interesting, so they're going to do it. They're not waiting for approvals. You don't have these mandates. They're like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. I mean, of course, they're prepared with props and things like that, but it's a totally different vibe than if
That
you were on a network production.
that's an upside. I mean, the downside is the the pie when I started in the business was cut like 4 ways, and all the viewers were there. So even if you were number 4, you were still getting millions and millions of viewers. Now it's been sliced so many ways. What does that do to people trying to be in this business today? You know?
It's gonna weed out a lot of people. You already have people. Having a side hustle for anyone young in the business is 100% necessary. It's not ideal, but it's just the facts. You know, I don't think the rates necessarily have gone down as dramatic as everybody makes it sound, but there's a lot less to go around, and people in a lot of ways, especially as things get more expensive.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother episode of economics,
You know,
but kind of where we are.
it's affecting the manufacturers as
Yeah,
well.
big time.
The companies that make the microphones and the recorders,
Yeah.
and I mean, I would assume the cameras also, even though I have no direct knowledge of that. But we do have direct knowledge that
Yeah.
the on the audio side at least the manufacturers are suffering as much as the freelancers.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
John DeTarsio, director of photography. Thanks so much for joining us. And we don't have a cool outro yet, so this is all we got. Thanks for coming on board. It's been really fun to chat with you again, and I'll see you on the road.
It was an honor, my friend. Both of you guys, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Good to see you again, John.
It's been a pleasure.
See you in an airport near you.